Well, good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to the third week of today's Tolkien Times. I'm Alan, the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and the TTT is my way of bringing you a little Middle-earth every single day. Now, of course, if you want longer and deeper content, please check out the Prancing Pony podcast for nearly 500 hours of free content, exploring the legendarium with years still to go. But folks, it is time to get started with this week and Mailbag Monday. Now, we got an interesting question from Paul in Canada way back in the day asking, in the end, what happens to Radagast? If I'm correct, he did not return with the elves or the ring bearers to the west, and he would not have died of old age. So, is there anywhere to look for information on what happened to Radagast? Well, Paul, there is not a lot on Radagast, but let me tell you what there is and what I would speculate based on that. Now, of course, first off, we know that he is one of the 5 wizards, or Istari, sent to Middle-earth, beginning around the year 1000 of the Third Age. And here are some relevant passages from the chapter on the Istari in Unfinished Tales. They came from over the sea out of the uttermost west, though this was for long known only to Círdan, guardian of the Third Ring, master of the Grey Havens, who saw their landings upon the western shores. Emissaries they were from the lords of the west, the Valar, who still took counsel for the governance of Middle-earth, and when the shadow of Sauron began first to stir again, took this means of resisting him. For with the consent of Eru, they sent members of their own high order, but clad in bodies as of men, real and not feigned, but subject to the fears and pains and weariness of earth, able to hunger and thirst and be slain. Though, because of their noble spirits, they did not die, and aged only by the cares and labors of many long years. And this the Valar did, desiring to amend the errors of old, especially that they had attempted to guard and seclude the Eldar by their own might and glory fully revealed, whereas now their emissaries were forbidden to reveal themselves in forms of majesty, or to seek to rule the wills of men or elves by open display of power, but coming in shapes weak and humble, were bidden to advise and persuade men and elves to good, and to seek to unite in love and understanding all those whom Sauron, should he come again, would endeavor to dominate and corrupt. Okay, that's a great passage, and we've got a few important things that come from that. Number one, Eru allowed the Valar to send members of their own high order. That is to say, other Ainur, so Maiar, right? I mean, we know they're not Valar. But notably, and this is important, they are in incarnate form. That is, they are in real bodies. They are able to hunger, thirst, and Gandalf will tell you, be killed. But they don't die of old age, right? That line that because of their noble spirits, they did not die. They could be slain, but that's a different story. Next, of course, they're forbidden to reveal their full power and forbidden to try to rule the children, Saruman. And then, of course, they have a job description, right? Advise and persuade the children to good, and seek to unite in love those whom Sauron would target. So, Paul, you're right. Radagast would not have died of old age, but his end is not described in any writings, or at least none that I could find. I scoured the letters, Unfinished Tales, and several volumes of the history of Middle-earth. So what would have happened to him? Does it depend on how he did his job? Well, if so, let's take a look at that. So in that chapter on the Istari, we also read, indeed, of all the Istari, only one remained faithful, and he was the last comer. That would be Gandalf. For Radagast the Fourth became enamored of the many beasts and birds that dwelt in Middle-earth, and forsook elves and men, and spent his days among the wild creatures. Thus he got his name, which is in the tongue of Numenor of old, and signifies, it is said, tender of beasts. Like Gandalf the Grey Wanderer, Radagast wasn't his original name. His original name was Iwendil, which means lover of birds. There's that Endil suffix, and we'll be seeing that again in Word Nerd Wednesday teaser. Now, pardon the aside on the names. Tolkien may have said the name Radagast derives from the Men of the Vales of Anduin, not now clearly interpretable, and that's in a footnote in Unfinished Tales. But in the history of The Hobbit, John Ratliff suggests that it may have been inspired by one of 3 things, either the Gothic chieftain Radagaisus, who is referenced as Radagast in some works, Old English Rad, meaning road, and Gast, meaning spirit, or angel, meaning spirit of the road, or what he leans toward, number 3, the name of the Slavic god Radagast, mentioned by Jacob Grimm. But back to what happened to him and not how he got his name. That wasn't the question. The last paragraph we read said that only Gandalf remained faithful. Now, Tolkien says something similar in letter 156 when he says that of the wizards, Gandalf alone fully passes the tests, and also that the wizards as such had failed. But Radagast certainly didn't fail in the same sense that Saruman failed. That is, he may not have succeeded at the job, but he didn't start working for the other side. In fact, it may help to remember that he was sent at Yavanna's request. Now, I didn't read that part of the Istari chapter, but yes, Saruman, or Kurumo, if you remember last week's Word Nerd Wednesday, was sent by Aule, but Yavanna chose Iwendil, Radagast. Now, with that in mind, I want to go back to Ratliff's history of the Hobbit because he wraps up judgment on Radagast nicely. And he says, "It seems that we have thus in Radagast someone who, insofar as he is able, opposes Sauron and all he stands for, and rightly values those creatures who are Yavanna's domain, but perhaps undervalues the children of Iluvatar, upon whom all the other Istari focus. His devotion to birds and beasts can be seen as parallel to Gandalf's fondness for hobbits, and his friendship with Beorn suggests that he aids not just the bears and other animals, but also the woodmen, who later become the Beornings. Perhaps Gandalf's words to Denethor can be applied more literally to Radagast. For my part, I shall not wholly fail of my task. If anything passes through this night that can still grow fair or bear fruit and flower again in days to come." Well said, Mr. Ratliff. That's where I land as well. Now, Paul, that wraps it up for your answer, and that wraps it up for today's Mailbag Monday. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer, please email it to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. I'll get to it as soon as I'm able. Now, folks, join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and follow or subscribe on your podcast apps to make sure each episode gets downloaded to your device. Follow at Tolkien Times on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.